This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, February 18th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. The United States on Wednesday urged the Rwandan government to provide humane treatment and a fair and transparent legal process in the case of Paul Rusesabagina, the hotelier depicted as a hero in a Hollywood film about Rwanda's 1994 genocide. Paul Rusesabagina appeared in a Kigali court on Wednesday, charged with terrorism offences. His family says the trial is a sham. Soraya Ali reports.
Paul Rusesabagina, the hotelier depicted as a hero in a Hollywood movie about Rwanda's 1994 genocide, was charged with terrorism-related offences in a Kigali court on Wednesday at the start of a trial that has drawn international scrutiny. Rusesabagina, who achieved fame through the film Hotel Rwanda, wore a prison-issue pink shirt as he appeared in court, where he faces 9 charges, including forming an illegal armed group, being a member of a terrorist group, and sponsoring terrorism. His family says the critic of President Paul Kagame is in poor health and that his trial is a sham. Rwanda's government says he has fomented violence and directed deadly attacks on its territory from exile. During pre-trial hearings, Rusesabagina said he had been abducted while visiting Dubai last year and forcibly returned to Rwanda. His lawyer argued that the court does not have jurisdiction.
I would like to insist on the fact that Rusesabagina is in Rwanda illegally. He did not come following an extradition. He didn't even come of his own free will. He found himself in Rwanda against his will.
Rusesabagina was not required to enter a plea on Wednesday. The judge said he will rule on whether the court has jurisdiction on February 26th.
Soraya Ali of Reuters filed that report. Ugandan military and police officers beat and seriously injured journalists on Wednesday as they covered the delivery of a petition about human rights violations to a United Nations office, according to a rights group. The security personnel assaulted the journalists as they covered opposition leader Bobi Wine, who was delivering the petition to the local United Nations office. Police alleged security personnel had dispersed and controlled crowds that had formed outside the UN office as Wine delivered the petition. At least 20 journalists were hurt in the attack, with at least 4 sustaining deep cuts on the head, according to Stephen Bwire, Secretary General of Uganda's Journalists Union. Africa's total reported death toll from COVID-19 was approaching 100,000 on Thursday, according to a tally by Reuters. While it is a fraction of those reported on other continents, the deaths are rising fast as a second wave of infections overwhelms hospitals. The deaths are driven by its southern region, especially South Africa, which accounts for nearly half. South Africa was ravaged by a second wave caused by a more contagious variant that has jumped up casualty wards. International aid group Doctors Without Borders this month called for urgent vaccine distributions in Southern Africa to counter the spread of the new variant, as most African countries have lagged richer Western nations in launching mass vaccination programs. Students at a school in Nigeria have built a robot that can help nurses care for coronavirus patients at a distance, and they're hoping to make it commercially viable. Angela Kumadu reports.
Rolling through the corridors of one Nigerian school is a nurse with a difference. Students at the Gliston International Academy in the capital, Abuja, have built MyRobot, a machine they hope can graduate from their classroom to help in hospitals across the world remotely treat COVID-19 patients. Nabila Abbas is part of the robotics team.
And I hope that it would not just stop at this COVID-19 pandemic. Other infectious diseases can also be curbed using my robot, like Ebola, Lassa fever, and all these other infectious viruses.
Under the florally patterned exterior, MyRobot has several hidden talents and can deliver medicines, take temperatures, and allow remote communication with a patient via a webcam. Though there are some kinks to iron out. Opening doors, for example, is not one of MyRobot's strengths. Nevertheless, the robot has backing of at least one healthcare professional. Dr. Oluwajoba Oroge says MyRobot should receive a lot of support.
And limiting the duration of time and the frequency that health workers have to be with patients, like COVID-19 patients at this time. So yes, it's ingenious, it's useful.
Teacher David Adeneye, who oversees the robotics team, says they are working on upgrades to an international standard with the hope that MyRobot will one day become commercially viable.
Reuters' Angela Okumadu filed that report. President Joe Biden's administration has pledged to improve the delivery of COVID-19 vaccines in the U.S. this week. The first federally supported mass vaccination sites opened in California. Matt Dibble reports.
Cars pour into Oakland, California's sports arena parking lot this week. Not for a baseball game, but for COVID-19 vaccinations. The Oakland location and another in Los Angeles are the first mass vaccination sites in the nation to be supplied and staffed by the U.S. federal government as part of President Biden's 100 Sites in 100 Days initiative.
Our goal is to vaccinate up to 6,000 per day. We have over 600 employees who are working at this location, and they're working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day to be able to reach as many people as possible.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA, is overseeing operations at the new sites in partnership with a wide array of state and local agencies and the military. The sites were erected in little over a week, signaling a new urgency in the U.S. response to the disease. The Trump administration, which pushed hard to approve vaccines for emergency use, had acknowledged struggles with vaccine supply and distribution, which has been handled by states. Biden has sought more central coordination and federal involvement.
We've now purchased enough vaccine supply to vaccinate all Americans. And now we're working to get those vaccines into the arms of millions of people.
California, the most populous state, also has the most COVID-19 deaths. It has struggled to maintain a steady supply of vaccines. Last week, a number of inoculation sites were forced to temporarily close because of vaccine shortages. Officials explained that the new FEMA sites are not competing with states, but adding a new source of doses.
Given the challenges and the demand for supply that exists, everywhere in all the communities, that we're additive to that and not taking away.
Both California locations were chosen for their proximity to the African American and Latino communities most impacted by the disease. The initiative will also be reaching directly into these communities.
This is our mobile emergency response support units that can go into the communities hardest hit, to be able to get vaccine to those who cannot get here.
Similar mass sites are planned to open in Texas and New York in coming weeks. Matt Dibble for VOA News, Oakland, California.
Rights groups in the United States say they are seeing a rise in hate speech and attacks against Asian Americans since the coronavirus pandemic began last year. Several recent violent incidents involving older Asian Americans have increased worries over anti-Asian bigotry. Yu Yang Ren and Isha Sarai have more.
Asians against violence, violence against us.
Protesters have taken to the streets to speak out against hate following a sharp uptick in attacks against Asian Americans over the past month. most recently in Oakland, California.
It could have been my mother, or it could have been my father or my grandparent that was attacked in the driveway.
Oakland police have responded by shifting more resources into the city's Chinatown area.
We've shifted resources to our Chinatown community. We've put our command posts in the Chinatown community, moving it from different locations so that it's seen as a presence throughout Chinatown. We've increased our routine patrols in our Chinatown area.
Reported attacks on Asian Americans have been steadily rising since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, which former President Trump called the China virus because of its origins in Wuhan.
We do know that the rise in anti-Asian racism and attacks against our community over the past year has had devastating impacts.
More than 2,800 incidents of racism and discrimination against Asian Americans in the U.S. have been reported over the past year to the organization Stop AAPI Hate. President Joe Biden signed an executive order last month aimed at combating racial discrimination against Asian Americans.
He is concerned about the discrimination against the actions against the Asian American community.
Most of the reported incidents against Asian Americans since last March were cases involving verbal harassment or shunning, while about 9% of incidents reported physical assaults. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Washington.
The newly appointed Democratic Republic of Congo Prime Minister Sama Lukonde Kyenge says security and safety of the Congolese people is among his top priorities. In recent weeks, DRC has reported a new outbreak of Ebola and a tragic boat accident. Along with many African countries, Congo is also trying to secure COVID-19 vaccines for its people. Analysts say President Felix Tshisekedi's move to appoint Lukonde appears to further sideline his predecessor, Joseph Kabila. I spoke to VOA reporter Anastasia Tudiesh in Kinshasa and began by asking her, what is the backstory?
Well, Esther, when President Tshisekedi rose to power a few years ago, he had very little in his hands, actually. His predecessor, former President Joseph Kabila, having the majority of the parliament in both chambers. So he could not do much. We have been witnessing the last 2 months. Things have changed. A certain amount of deputies that were in the former president's platform pledged allegiance to President Tshisekedi's sacred union. And a majority of deputies have voted a motion of censure against Prime Minister Ilukamba, forcing him to resign. So now President Tshisekedi has the majority at the parliament, and he has chosen a prime minister closer to home, so to speak.
What does Prime Minister Lukonde bring to the table?
I'm tempted to answer he brings a lot to the table, and even the table. First of all, his age. He is 43. He's young enough to be his predecessor's son, which is not a bad thing. He is a trained engineer, and he has been the CEO of a copper company, and he's not new to politics neither. He has been engaging in the political field for almost 2 decades. He himself, he's the son of a minister, and he has been a minister of sports and youth. He brings Katanga, a very strategic region that is lots of supporters of former President Kabila are from this region. And the fact that Moise Katumbi, the big man of Katanga, who used to be the governor of Katanga, is the first one who have congratulated Prime Minister Lukonde on his nomination, says a lot. So it is a very interesting duo that we are witnessing here.
So what has been the reaction of the Congolese people after his appointment?
Well, Esther, Congolese people actually want to eat, to live, and to work, and they don't care who is up there. Of course, they are interested. They are very aware of what is going on and what is at play. But their concern really is to be able to eat and live and raise the families correctly. But I will also say that I have seen in the social media lots of questions about the origin, the actual citizenship of the new prime minister. But it's a classic in DRC. Almost each time someone rises to power, his origins are questions.
Where do they suppose he is from?
He is said to be from Uganda, and he's also, yes, he's said to be from Uganda. He's said to still be in link attached with President Kabila. He has been a minister of youth and sports. I said it before, but he also resigned because of different point of view. But people still are showing lots of pictures of him with President Kabila as a way to say, oh, we might have a traitor in the house.
Anastasia, give us a little insight into the genesis of the political fallout between President Tshisekedi and former President Joseph Kabila.
The fallout would originate from a lack of the need from the President Tshisekedi to have, his hands untied. He had his hand tied, literally. There is not a law that he could implement because he was not at majority in parliament. So you are the president. You want to be able to actually, implement what you think and to change things the way you want. And that was not possible when former President Kabila had all the keys to the power in the lawmaking.
That was VOA reporter Esther Githui-Ewart speaking to me from Kinshasa. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover during the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, former President Donald Trump and top leaders duo for control over the Republican Party. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is out of office, but not out of politics. Trump remains popular among Republicans, and he is now picking fights with some top leaders in a battle for control over the Republican Party. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara reports.
The Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino was demolished Wednesday, the last remnants of a once dominant gambling destination in Atlantic City. But the former president is not giving up on his political brand. On Tuesday, he attacked Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, the top Republican who blamed him for the Capitol siege on January 6th.
President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events.
In a statement, Trump said Republican senators who support McConnell will not win again. He threatened to back right-wing primary challengers against party incumbents.
The main goal with that is to make sure that the 75 million people who voted for President Trump know that the president is still going to be active and engaged in U.S. politics, that he is going to keep pushing for candidates who support the America First agenda.
7 Republican senators who voted guilty in the impeachment trial face criticism, even censure from the party, underscoring the refusal of grassroots Republicans to break from Trump.
the Republican Party is a party of Trump. And unfortunately, you have the principled, moderate conservatives, the, I would say center-right people, which is probably where I fall more politically, who I think feel sort of, I would say, homeless right now.
Trump's role in the Capitol riot is likely to remain in focus as the House of Representatives moves to establish an independent commission similar to the commission that studied the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. The former chair of the 9/11 Commission, Thomas Keane, is urging a bipartisan commission on the January 6th siege.
This is not a commission to get President Trump. This is a commission with fact finders.
A recent poll shows 75% of Republicans say they would like to see the former president play a prominent role within the party.
We love you. We will be back in some form.
But criminal investigations on Trump's role in the Capitol riot and election interference, as well as legal challenges over suspicions of tax and insurance fraud, may also determine the former president's future role in politics. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
First ladies are not elected, but once their husband becomes president, they are expected to represent the nation and to look good while doing it. Although they have no overt political power, VOA's Dora McCoy reports that modern first spouses have turned to fashion diplomacy to get their point across.
A few hours after becoming First Lady, Jill Biden wore a custom dress and coat embroidered with the official flower of each U.S. state and territory.
The state flower for Delaware was embroidered closest to her heart along the trim of the dress. So she was making, with that fashion statement, I think she was trying to make a statement about unity, which of course has been already one of her husband's main themes as president, unifying the nation.
What a First Lady wears is actually very important. Whether it's fair or not is another question, but it's, fashion diplomacy at its peak.
Brouwer, who has written a book about First Ladies, says the president's wife is expected to wear American-made clothing. She also has the power to make a designer's career. That's what happened with Michelle Obama's inaugural look.
Their inaugural gown that she wore, famously the off-the-shoulder white gown, was by Jason Wu, who few people had ever heard of, and she really launched his career.
Brouwer says First Ladies are under pressure to look good but approachable. They're supposed to wear clothes that American women could potentially afford, or at least aspire to own.
When Melania Trump was First Lady, she famously wore this $51,000 Dolce & Gabbana jacket, which was, the price of most people's yearly income. And it was just seen as completely out of touch.
Michelle Obama wore plenty of high-priced designers, but she also became known for blending affordable pieces into her wardrobe.
We saw Michelle Obama mixing high and low. She was the mom-in-chief, so she would wear cardigans from J. Crew with maybe a Carolina Herrera skirt. So I think that First Ladies have this real advantage in that they can spotlight designers, but they have a disadvantage in that they can't wear things that are inaccessible because people don't want to see that.
When it comes to Jill Biden, Brouwer expects to see America's newest First Lady wearing clothes that are accessible and affordable to most people, especially now with the pandemic raging.
So please keep wearing your mask.
Dora McCoy, VOA News, Washington.
China is promising to provide its Sinovac vaccine to Central and Eastern European countries scrambling to obtain COVID-19 vaccinations for their populations. Beijing's pledge came at a summit earlier this month with 17 Central and Eastern European nations in what experts see as part of a global effort by Beijing to expand influence and diversify China's trading partners. VOA's Adita Dinilari reports.
China's pandemic diplomacy comes at a time when Central and Eastern European countries face increasing pressure from their populations for life-saving vaccines. But their inability to procure the necessary doses has given China an opening, says analyst J. Stephen Morrison.
The Western states, the most powerful European and North American countries are hoarding their supplies of vaccines. The Chinese are coming forward and aggressively marketing theirs and using them as diplomatic tools.
Distributing the Chinese vaccines is aimed at generating goodwill, but Beijing is also trying to drive a wedge between the region and its Western allies, says expert Valbona Zeneli.
You know, in Southern Europe, in Central Eastern Europe, has been this idea of pushing the dissatisfaction with the European Union and the way that the European Union has handled, vaccination, but also previously the crisis.
Since 2012, China has offered direct investments and loans for major infrastructure projects in Central and Eastern Europe and promised increased trade, but almost a decade later, these projects have produced few jobs or economic boost for local businesses. Now there are growing concerns over Chinese business practices that ignore labor rights and environment protections.
In most of cases, these are loans that will be paid back from the governments of these countries, and non-transparent contracts where we see Chinese companies implementing the projects, in most of the cases, Chinese labor force and Chinese raw materials.
When it comes to trade, Zanelli notes a deepening imbalance in which Chinese companies are the main beneficiaries and local businesses have seen little increase in their exports to China. That may be about to change as China looks for new import partners to reduce its dependence on U.S. imports, says J. Stephen Morrison.
They're turning away from that deep interdependence. They're trying to lower that and they want to find replacement. Well, maybe then there's a more serious engagement here when they come and talk about export markets into China from Eastern and Central Europe. Maybe this time around it's more serious.
Morrison adds that China took a major gamble by rolling out its vaccines before completing the rigorous full trials. Failure, he warns, could be detrimental and not just for China's reputation.
That could destroy the public trust and confidence in vaccines. It could begin to set us back. The world needs to move forward towards a common achievement of herd immunity, of getting to 75 or 80% of coverage with safe and effective vaccines.
As China pushes to expand its influence, experts stress the need for a more assertive engagement from Western powers to ensure that China is not using weaknesses in Central and Eastern Europe to gain an unfair advantage in the global marketplace.
The most important thing is creating a level playing field, a transparent playing field for the rules of the global economy.
In Europe and beyond, where China has ambitions, experts say Beijing needs to prove that it is willing to embrace its responsibilities of being a global power that plays by the rules. Ardita Dunelari, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.